Hello friends, I'm back again, and I want to depart from maybe the normal freshwater planted tank discussions or terrarium discussions that we have on this channel and maybe explore some different aspects of the hobby. And I've encountered this person named Chris from Aquatic Marine who's offered to kind of talk to me a little bit about saltwater and maybe the trappings of saltwater, what the things that make it a little bit easier to do. Saltwater isn't something I've experimented a whole lot with. My daughter had some ambitions for a saltwater tank, and we set one up and messed with it. We made a few mistakes. Then ultimately there was a kind of a tragic end to the whole thing. Not enough to make me not want to do it ever, but it hasn't been something that I've been more interested in pursuing. Now with things like macroalgae and stuff like that, there's a lot of like really interesting aspects where you can almost do sort of a planted tank in saltwater. We don't discuss a lot of that, but I wanted to get a kind of a good baseline for a good place to start in saltwater in general. So I went up to Aquatic Marine and talked to Chris. Here it is. Hey folks, we're at Aquatic Marine today, and I'm here with Chris. Chris, what's your last name?
Beecham.
Beecham, Chris Beecham. And he's been working here for most of this year, and but has worked in saltwater since you were 13, you said?
Yes.
That's a long time. So we're going to ask him a few questions and kind of get a sense for maybe what is important to know as you begin a saltwater journey. Now, I have a lot of freshwater planted tanks, so I don't have a lot of knowledge in and around the saltwater world, and so I'm really curious to know maybe what some of the pitfalls are when you begin a tank or something like that. So I'm going to put the camera on Chris, and we're going to hear from him. Let's say that I've been keeping freshwater planted tanks for 13 years or so, and suddenly decided I should try saltwater. What are some things that are radically different between the two? Is it so different?
The basic chemistry for fish-only systems are going to be the same. Well, when you branch out in the freshwater world and you have plants, you have to dose certain elements like your iron, your cell, which is your bioavailable carbon to help nuisance algae control, stuff like that. But when it comes to saltwater, you have to maintain your alkalinity, magnesium, calcium, you got strontium, bromine, fluoride. There's a whole plethora of different types that you got to do. But for the most part, they're pretty much similar as far as difficulty, in my opinion.
So you can use a lot of the same equipment. I guess I've heard that you have to avoid like metals and stuff.
Yes, you have to avoid metals in the tanks. When it comes to lighting, they're both radically different. Unless you're using, unless you're having just a fish-only system, then the lighting really doesn't matter. It just helps the fish, and you will get some different types of algae. Mainly the lighting is for the coral, and it helps to mimic the spectrum of the sun, because freshwater lights have more red and green spectrum. Well, that's the first colors that you lose when you go underwater. So, but other than that, the heaters are the same, the pumps can be the same, you just need twice as much filtration.
What about what do corals help clean the water kind of like plants do, or are they, is it really just more critters in there? more so than plants. I guess technically they're not plants, they're animals, right?
Correct. So they do absorb some of the phosphates in the waters and some of your nitrates, which is your excess nutrients and whatnot. So it's not going to be nowhere near as drastic as, say, Java moss or something like that in an aquarium. There are similar corals that kind of are the easy ones, like the Java moss would be green star polyps in the saltwater world, and your super hard type corals like your acros, those are going to be more like your flamingo anubis, which is a little more light demanding and all that stuff, so you do have to look out for those sort of things. But in general, they're pretty similar.
If you could recommend like a top 3 beginner saltwater fish, what would you put up there?
The easiest would be clownfish. A lot of people want to start with smaller tanks, so theoretically clownfish, they do fine. They They actually are required to have bigger tanks, but they do pretty well in smaller systems.
Yeah.
So the clownfish, I usually tell customers to get a pair of clowns to start with. They're a very hardy fish. The next would be some sort of wrasse, depending on the size of the tank that they have. I'm a big advocate for using fish that have a purpose when it comes to the system. Clownfish would be my poopers, if you will, for my nitrates and stuff. Wrasses would help with pest control, and then some sort of sand sifting goby or lawnmower blenny or something like that to help with keeping the sand bed clean and the rocks clean of algae.
Do you have to start with live sand, or do you let it develop over time?
You can start with pretty much anything. Nowadays, you can just go buy a bottle of Turbo Star or Stability or some sort of beneficial bacteria in a bottle. It does help speed the process up if you start with live rock or live sand or both. But I like to start as sterile as possible. And I always use dry rock, and I use Carib Sea live sand. My favorite is the Bimini Pink, but that's just personal preference.
Well, my daughter and I tried saltwater a while back, and she brought home some coral that had been in a tank, and then just put it in her tank to hopefully, kind of start that bioactivity. But what we got was a bunch of little critters that came along with it.
Yes.
And in the comments, what I heard most was, dip it, you gotta dip it.
Yes.
So what does that mean to dip it?
So if you want to step over here, I can show you different
Sure.
types of coral dip. So you have the Coral RX. Where's it at? You have Reef Dip. You have Reef Primer. It's all basically just to help get rid of any kind of pest, whether it's flatworms, mainly flatworms, but depending on the type of coral, you could have zoa eating spiders, you could have acropora eating nudibranch, monopora eating nudibranch, and they're specific pests for specific corals as well. So
At first we thought it was really interesting, like, wow, this is neat, look at all this stuff coming out, but it's just like, and then it soon turned into millions of things.
right, so even here, when I have a frag system going from one tank to another, from the frag system to my tank, which I'll show you here in a little bit, every coral gets dipped, and that's just, you don't know what one tank has versus the other.
So you got a tank here you're super proud of?
Yes, sir, I do.
Come show me.
All right. So my lights just went off, so bear with me for just a second, and I'll turn them back on for you.
What kind of light system is that?
This is the Neptune Sky.
Oh, okay. It's a Wi-Fi capable smart light. Does it ramp up and down?
It does. So this is, now a lot of the corals are starting to go to sleep for the night, and they're drawing in. Everything in this tank is, my opinion, is easy, but most people would look at it and think that they could never do this. So I'm a big advocate on the stony corals, which are all the little branchy, sticks, if you will. People call other people that enjoy acropora, they call them stickheads.
Stickheads.
So, yes. But the main reason why I set this system up in the store is just to show customers you don't have to have just this huge elaborate system in order to have a beautiful tank. This is a 40-gallon tank, and it's an all-in-one, so it can be done in pretty much anything.
So I noticed a lot of these are on little plugs. Are these ceramic plugs?
Some of them are ceramic, and some of them are basically sand that is compressed together. They all have different, everybody has their own preference when it comes to fragging corals, which one they prefer. I don't have a preference. It's just, I will use either one of them.
So how essential is the coral? Like, I'm curious. I might want to start a tank, but really I just want fish. Is the coral's kind of like almost another part of the hobby, kind of like plants and regular aquariums,
Correct.
right?
Yeah, so the corals are, a lot of people when they think of reefs, they picture just the coral, but that's not necessarily the case. There are certain reefs that are just different types of rocks, and they'll have different types of algae growing on it for different life forms, and different types of crabs and stuff like that that are specific to that type of region. It is beneficial to have fish with the coral. It's a lot more difficult to maintain your nutrient levels if you don't have fish in there.
So the corals need the fish more than the fish need the corals.
Correct. Now there are certain fish that do live out in the wild that are in the corals. Like for instance, the green chromis, these little guys right through here. Out in the wild, they live in acropora colonies, and there'll be hundreds of them in there. And when the waves come out, or pull through the reef, they'll all come swimming out, and they'll kind of patrol, and then they'll suck back into the coral. But earlier when I was speaking about wrasses, see how this little guy, he's just swimming around and he's constantly looking around?
Yeah, he
He's
looks
looking
like a
for-
Japanese flag almost with a big circle.
He's looking for pests.
Oh yeah,
So
out there like hunting down Aptasia and other things. Does he eat Aptasia?
he will
too?
not eat Aptasia.
Ah,
But as contrary to popular belief, I think that Aptasias are somewhat a viable part of the hobby. Even though they're absolutely terrifying to some people, they're out in the wild. Try to make your tanks as natural as possible. And I mean, if you look in here, I've got Aptasia.
Oh, yeah?
I don't freak out about it, just because I know that if they start to get out of control, there are different means as far as natural ways to get rid of them.
well,
Whether
there's
it's-
one or two fish that'll eat it.
Yes,
right?
peppermint shrimp will eat them, filefish will eat them, and different species of butterfly will eat them. Most commonly, the copperband butterfly will be the one that eats the Aptasia.
Huh. Keep the
And
light one up.
lights went back off.
Oh wow! What's wild? He looks red with the blue lights on, but with them off, he looked like he was kind of orange colored.
Yeah, so he's actually called a two-spot wrasse. He's in the chorus wrasse family. When they mature, he'll lose his white color and maintain the rest of his spots and all that, but he gets a metallic silverish color. A lot of people refer to them as clown wrasses. They are actually two different types of wrasse.
Oh, okay.
So if you Google a clown wrasse, it's going to say that it could get up to 2 foot long. This guy, being in the chorus wrasse family, he's not going to get that big.
He's just going to town munching on little things he finds.
Yeah, but they will also eat copepods or amphipods. But it's fun to just watch the wrasses swim around. That's one of my favorite fish, aside from Banggai cardinals, even though a lot of people say they're just plain boring and ugly.
Is that one of your favorites?
Yes.
Do-
I mean, I've got one tattooed on me, so
Oh, okay.
I've definitely.
Is that a pajama cardinal or is that different?
That's actually a Hawaiian Banggai cardinal.
Okay. I remember one of the first fish. I was like, wow, I'd really like to try that as a pajama cardinal. Because they kind of, it's like their pattern just stops halfway through and
Yep.
like they're wearing pajamas. I thought that was hilarious.
So I like the cardinals because they're lazy. If
Oh,
you
yeah?
will. They just kind of sit around and just, it's like, yeah, everybody's zooming past me. I'm just gonna sit here, just kind of schmug.
I like the ones that are easy to photograph.
Yeah, that
And
definitely
pretty.
helps.
If they're pretty and easy to photograph, they're my favorite. So there's a lot of opportunities for clownfish, especially in Knoxville, right? I mean,
Yes.
because we're actually one of the, well, I guess Jeff City technically is the big distribution hub.
Yep,
for
that's
all that.
Sustainable Aquatics.
How neat. So, equipment-wise, what do you prefer here? I see it looks like you've got a screen on top.
Yeah, so all of the innovative marine tanks come with this, aside from the basic little 15-gallon cube.
Uh-huh.
It's just like the entry level. All the pro kits, I should say, they come with the lids. So the only thing that I'm running on this, aside from the power heads, which are the MP10s.
Yeah.
Couldn't remember what size they were. I do have a UV sterilizer. My dosing, which I'm using the Aquavitro Sentia dosers. My regular top off system, a protein skimmer, and then I just added this yesterday, which is, it's a phosbane reactor that I put Dragon's Breath macroalgae in.
Ha.
But
I've heard a lot about microalgae as basically kind of the working a lot like the plants do as far as absorbing lots
Yeah.
of nutrients and stuff.
that they do. They can be a little difficult to get started, but once they get started, they will take a lot of your nutrients out of the water. The easiest one, in my opinion, a lot of people say Chato's the easiest. Dragon's Breath has always been the easiest for me. It's a little bit more expensive, but it's also a lot prettier. There's people that will put Dragon's Breath in their display. It's a real bright red, and it has a real fluorescent orange tips as it grows, so
Yeah.
it looks like it's on fire. But-
So you've been working here doing the retail thing for almost since the beginning of the year, right? I think
Correct.
you said February.
Yes.
That's a good run.
Yeah.
What question do you get the most from people when they come to you for saltwater stuff?
What's the easiest coral I can do?
Easiest and cheapest, right?
You'd be surprised. A lot of people don't really say the cheapest.
Really?
It's
So they
what's
don't
the
mind paying
easiest.
a little bit more as long as
Correct.
they have success.
Right.
That sense of success is important.
Yeah, and I've lost a lot of money over the years in coral and stuff. So I try to just be as super honest as possible and tell them, yeah, this one's, they say it's easy, but I would steer clear of this particular type, or, you know, this one's, a lot of people are say is more difficult, but it's actually really easy to do. So just really depends on what type of tank you want to have and what your goals are.
Yeah. We lost our couple of little pieces we had going to a heater. In fact, we lost the whole tank to a heater that got stuck on or something and just boiled everything.
Yeah, so that, now that you bring up heaters, light keeps going off.
I thought it was my light.
Now that you keep bringing up the heaters, or that you brought up the heaters, I should say, that's one thing I do tell customers. You know, you can make an aquarium in anything. You can go buy a big Tupperware box if you wanted
That's
to.
true, yeah.
I always say, spend the most money on your heater and your lights, because those two are going to be the main points in the system. You know, lights fail, coral dies. Heater fails, corals are going to die that way too, or you're going to cook your fish.
It's definitely the most unforgiving part of the whole setup, isn't
Yeah,
it?
and I mean, used to, back in the day when I first started, it was glass heaters were the cheap, you know, they were a lot more expensive, but they were the cheapest way to go. They are still the cheapest way to go, but now with the advancements and everything that we have in this hobby, titanium heaters are not much more, and you have a lot more forgivability with those. Especially in saltwater, you don't have to worry about them busting as often. I mean, very seldom they will crack, but it takes a lot. I mean, you would have to do something drastic to make it break.
I guess food options and stuff are going to be based on what kind of fish you pick
Right.
for the size. Are there a lot of fish that can still go in a... What size tank is this?
This is a 40-gallon.
This is a 40?
Yes.
That's a pretty good size tank in freshwater. Is that, would you say that that's a pretty decent tank in saltwater too? Or like, because I know the smaller you go, the harder it is. And I think that I've been told that is kind of doubly so with the saltwater. Is that true? Or
It really just depends on who you talk to. I mean, my first aquarium was, I bought a 10-gallon tank, and I bought a porcupine puffer, which is a big no-no.
Yeah.
But didn't know any better. And I kept it for about 3 years, and I had no problems with it. And it's just all about how diligent you are going to be to that tank. So,
I guess that's true too. Like your amount of involvement makes a huge difference in your success, no
Exactly.
matter how wrong you do it, according to
Right.
experts. Or
Exactly. So the smaller the system, like this 15-gallon here, if I lose a gallon of water due to evaporation, my salinity is going to skyrocket. I lose a gallon of water out of 40, it's going to jump up, but it's not going to be as drastic. If I lose a gallon of water out of this 180 gallon system, you're not even going to notice it.
Do you have to use RO water?
You don't have to. You could use dechlorinated tap water, but it's not it's not recommended. I prefer to use RO or RODI. If you have access to RODI water, I would definitely use that, because it takes out everything. So you're left with just pure clean water with RODI.
Even with like fish only?
With fish only, you can get by with RO, but if you have corals, you want to put the least amount of contaminants in the tank as you possibly can.
Right.
That being said, anytime I stick my hand in my tank, just because the corals and everything, or in this tank, I will dose some sort of bacteria just to help, just in case, I had a little bit of lotion on my hand or something, something. You never know what you have on your hand, and you can wash your hand 100 times. There's still going to be some kind of germs on your hands that could potentially cause damage in the tank.
Yeah, unfortunately, and we use lots and lots of detergents and all these things. They're all in our clothes.
Yep.
They're in our fingernails. It's all over the place. So especially if you wash your hands like you're supposed to.
Right.
Yeah, you might end up with some residue.
Yep.
Inside of there.
So the best one to use, the best soap to use for this hobby is Dawn dish detergent.
Oh yeah.
So if it's good enough to clean baby ducks,
Yeah. Okay.
So, but that's what we use. I haven't seen any adverse effects using that, and we've been using it for a long time in the store, and I've been using it a long time in my personal life. But yeah, it's just got to make sure you stay clean. And one of the hardest things for customers to take whenever I give them advice is to tell them, I know it's tempting. I know you want to look and be like, oh, that one needs to be moved. That one needs to be moved here. The more you keep your hands out of the tank, the better off it is.
What about water changes and stuff? How does that work?
It really depends on what type of tank you want to do, whether you're going to be dosing or not dosing. Your bio load makes a big difference. Your equipment makes a difference as well. This particular tank, with what I've got running, I haven't done a water change on this one in 4 months. But I'm dosing all my elements through the doser. So,
oh yeah, so you got all that just kind of getting pumped into it.
But that definitely will help you in the long run, because in smaller systems, the water changes, the biggest thing is to lower your nutrients, as well as bring up your alkalinity, magnesium, calcium, and any trace elements that you would need.
Well, Chris, I really appreciate you spending some time with us today and talking about saltwater. I'm tempted to try it again.
I'll come in, we'll get you set up.
Maybe next year. We'll see. Thanks a bunch. I appreciate it, man.
Thank you, Chris, for taking the time to talk to me, and Aquatic Marine for letting me come in there and film. I'm probably going to explore a couple of other aspects. I'd like to push the boundaries a little bit for things that I know how to do and things that I'm real comfortable with. I want to get out of that comfort zone and maybe do some different things in and around aquaculture. So if you like this video, if you want to see more of this sort of thing, be sure to let me know in the comments down below. Click like and subscribe if you haven't already. I'd love to see you again. Until next time, follow your bliss, keep a clean tank. I'll see you soon.